a fair amount to cover today. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to EatDenver's virtual program, Sorting It Out, Complying with Denver's Universal Recycling and Composting Ordinance. So, brief context, City and County of Denver has officially adopted the new rules and regulations for the voter-approved Universal Recycling and Compost Ordinance, URCO, which takes effect September 1st, 2026. This has actually been in effect for a while, just enforcement is beginning September 1st. So this is the requirement for food and businesses to provide recycling and composting access. For customers, staff, and contractors, we'll go a little more in depth into what that is, but just a heads up, this is starting with an education first enforcement approach in year one. So to not get too nervous about this. And hopefully we'll save a ton of time at the end for all of your questions. For our panelists, you know this context, but we are joined here by chefs, owners, operators, and staff members of food and beverage establishments across Denver. If you and your team want to learn more, you can always visit the page on Denver.gov to learn more about requirements and exemptions. And you can also, I think that was it. I think that was my intro. So we're going to hop in, sharing some more specific details about the ordinance and how to begin incorporating this into your operations. We are joined by a fantastic panel, two Christy Turners. And so we're going to start real quick with our panelists just going around, introducing your name, your position, and a little context to why you're on this panel. So let's start with Christy Turner of Scraps.
Hi, everyone. First time, and hopefully not the last, I'm on a panel with another Christy Turner, founder and CEO of Scraps. We are a compost hauler and processor, founded in 2017, operating in the Denver metro region.
Passing it to Austin.
How's it going? Austin Carson, co-owner of restaurant Olivia and now Dear Amelia as of this year.
Great. Other Christy Turner?
Hi, Christy Turner with the City and County of Denver. I am the Universal Recycling Program Manager.
And Meghan.
My name is Meghan Ibach. When I signed up for this panel, I was working for Eco Products, which is a manufacturer of certified compostable packaging. Since then, I recently actually changed jobs where I'm going to be supporting the bigger system of collecting compostable packaging and compost systems. But the reason why I'm on this panel is because I have worked for years supporting food service and the generator with building compost programs to then also support the haulers and the composters to make sure everything they're receiving is working for them, ideally including compostable packaging. So happy to be here.
Great. Welcome, panelists. Christy Turner with the city. For people who haven't really dug into the rules yet, can you explain what does compliance actually require of a food and beverage business starting September 1st?
Sure. So to be in compliance, there's a few things you'll have to do. First, you'll need to provide containers for recycling for your customers, employees, and so on in both the front and the back of house. Compost containers must be provided for the back of house collection of any food scraps or uneaten food. You can also donate the leftover edible food that's still, within health code standards. Donating that food is really strongly encouraged. And businesses are also permitted and encouraged to share services with neighboring businesses, neighboring restaurants, etc. You also need to have signage that clearly identifies each waste stream hung near each container. And that signage must follow standards for identifying words, symbols, colors, graphics, and language. You must also provide waste sorting training for your employees and contractors. And finally, you will need to create a waste diversion plan showing how your business complies with these requirements, including if you are sharing services. And you will be submitting that plan with your food business license renewal or upon request by the city. And I just want to say, we know that, for many of the businesses, buildings, event organizers, this is a new process, a new concept. And our job is to make sure that no one fails because they don't have the right information or guidance. We know that we won't get 100% compliance on September 1. We kind of expect this to ramp up over time, kind of like a dial, not a switch. And I've heard that before. So like, we've talked about in the beginning, don't panic. We're here to help you out.
Great. Could you also help define what a food business, what counts as a food business under this ordinance, and are there any exemptions?
Sure. So when we say food businesses, we mean all licensed food businesses. So retail food establishments, including commissaries, food processing, wholesale and warehouse establishments, and food banks. And then as far as exemptions are concerned, we do have some exemptions in place for things like space constraints, not having a waste hauler that can service your business, financial hardships, or if you produce a minimal volume of recyclables or food waste. And there'll be different documentation to support each of those different type of exemption requests.
Great. And that can all be found on the Denver Gov website?
Yes. And we are updating that website weekly with more information. It's kind of being built as we enter into September 1. So more to come, but always keep an eye on that information.
Perfect. We will share that link out after this as well. One last question for you. What does education-based enforcement mean?
Sure. So as you said, the requirements go into effect September 1, and we expect people to be working toward compliance. So education first means if we encounter someone who's not fully compliant yet, we will focus first on helping build understanding of the requirements and connecting them with the resources that they need to be successful and not issuing a fine. That said, compliance is required by law. And for those who aren't working to meet those requirements, enforcement could follow.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're going to pass it over to Austin, coming from the food and beverage space. So when Restaurant Olivia and Dear Amelia were incorporating compost and sustainability programs, what changed physically in your space to get compliant?
Yeah, so we've been doing this at Restaurant Olivia for quite a while, and I guess we're able to kind of map those processes into Dear Amelia when it opened. So there wasn't much change at Dear Amelia. It was kind of designed from the onset to be a little more efficient within this context. I would say compost was probably the biggest physical change, although not that big of a deal. I was chatting with our director of sustainability and some of the other kind of key people and sustainability stuff in our organization. And biggest thing really was just going from 1 to 2 bins. And instead of a compost bin, we have 2 Slim Jims. We have 3 actually, 1 for recycling, 1 for trash, 1 for compost. And I think at the heart of all of this really is training and constant gentle pressure. And if you're in a busy restaurant, trying to establish systems that are easy to follow when you're busy and when you're in the weeds. 2 bins helps a lot. 2 different colors or a different color bag inside of the compost bin has helped a lot. Training is an important part of it. We have signage everywhere. Signage tends to sort of disappear and become, as Paula calls it, white noise after a couple of weeks. So we have to sort of return that dialogue into our training. So we have training that happens when you're onboarded that is with Paula, kind of all things sustainability, but we do recycling, we do Ridwell for hard to recycle materials, and then compost. And then we try to, again, keep that message constant. And to the extent I would say that you can get as many people, if not everybody, involved in being stewards of this process, the easier it's going to be. And I would shout out Scraps in particular. We took the team out there last year and had a really good time walking their facility. And it reorients your perspective to know that this is not a mechanized process, that there's actually a human being walking through the compost and picking gloves and stickers out of it. Being able to bring that back to the team and kind of humanize that part of it, that there's an ethical responsibility that we have not only to reduce waste and be mindful in our consumption, but on the back end, as we externalize the waste, there are people who are doing this work, and it's worth championing them to the extent that we can, but also ensuring that we're not making their lives more difficult.
I like that. It sounds like shared responsibility. Do you have something in your employee handbook too, or is it mostly that employee training process where you're getting people involved?
Yeah, so it's referenced a number of places in our handbook, and our core values make reference to sustainability, which is kind of the context here. And then our mission, purpose, and vision also make reference to that. When you're onboarded in our organization, like I said, you have a half day spent with Paula, and she goes over all of our, everything from sourcing and waste reduction all the way to, hey, we're actually renovating the restaurant right now and kind of redesigning the area for recyclables between what actually gets recycled and then what we send to Ridwell for hard to recycle. And again, in the beginning we had one person who was kind of spearheading all of this because she has a heart for it. And what we very quickly realized, this is not a one person job, that it's a team lift and everybody has to play a role in this process, particularly, this is real money being spent, and it's not an insignificant amount of money. And I think if we can put ourselves in a position to rethink menu design and individual dish design in such a way that we're internalizing the cost but actually decreasing cost of goods on the back end and doing it in a positive some way, you actually can kind of get momentum that propels all of this forward.
Great, thank you. Moving into kind of that materials packaging world with Meghan, how should operators think about choosing to-go containers, cups, utensils, this serviceware model under this ordinance?
So I think it's important to note that this ordinance does not require front of house collection of compost. As you all know, the front of house post-consumer stream is pretty messy, right? And so this ordinance really is focusing on back of house food only. Now, at the same time, there's a lot of times where even if you're only collecting food scraps, a lot of material from your front of house might inevitably end up in your back of house compost system. So I think it's important to, if your business is focused on, if your employees are bringing plates back and scraping them into the bin, or kind of cleaning up after your guests, I would then really encourage you to consider switching, talking to your hauler and your composter, seeing what types of compostable packaging they accept, if any. And if they do accept compostable packaging, really trying to switch all the disposables to that certified compostable plant-based product. And yes, so I think obviously to reduce your waste, durables is preferred and is your number one. And obviously, I think Christy will talk on this. The city does have support to help businesses transition from single use to reusable. But as we all know, coming from the food service landscape, that not 100%, it's really hard to get 100% reusable. There's always going to be like ramekins are always hard, straws, sometimes utensils, kids' cups. It's, the wraps that you might line your tray with or your basket. So all of those little things, those little details, when you are building out a compost program, really try to think about what can get into the bin, and make sure that it will actually be compostable. And my rule of thumb is if the product doesn't tell you it is compostable, it's probably not. If a lot of times people get confused when there's like a craft boat or a craft colored cup. Just because it's brown does not mean it's compostable. In fact, Colorado does have regulations that require a green tinting, green design, the word compostable, a logo of certification, which is awesome. I think we've come a long way. It's not perfect. Obviously, there's still products in the market that are misleading and that are confusing. So I think it's always important to just talk back to your hauler and your composter to see what they accept, and then obviously work with your distributor. Eco Products does have a lot of support to help businesses figure out what is and what is not compostable, and they will have a me again, so that can help you look at your list to make sure 100% of your disposables are in fact certified compostable.
I think one of the major concerns for operators with this ordinance is cost, and switching over to compostables often comes at an increased cost from maybe something that's recyclable or goes into the waste stream. And so do you have any ways that people can offset costs when they're switching to compostable and recyclable products?
Yeah. I will say, in my experience, most of the time, food service packaging is just not really technically recyclable. Most traditional MRFs, material recovery facilities or recycling centers, they don't want the clamshells. They don't typically want the cups. Sometimes they do. The cups are weird. Cups, people are trying to say more cups, but they're just not that valuable. Nobody wants utensils. And oftentimes these containers are covered in grease, or they have bones, chicken bones, or ketchup and those things. So that's actually why compostable packaging is such a better solution, because there's a possible in market for it versus the trash. But yes, the compostables are more expensive. I think over the years there is a little bit more cost parity. The industry has tried to make it more cost parity, but those products are certified, they're tested, they're vetted. There's a lot more going on with it than like a plastic spoon, from a fossil fuel based source. So I think in terms of finding your compostable packaging, definitely talk to different distributors. There are different prices coming from different distributors. Different brands are a little bit more affordable than others. Like for example, Eco Products has a sister company called Vegware, and Vegware is just there is the cost fighter, if you will, the cost competitive brand of Eco Products. But in terms of trying to introduce composting into your operation, I love, it's not necessarily a huge savings, but right sizing your bins. So if you're shifting everything that you were throwing into your landfill bin into a compost bin, your landfill bin does not need to be picked up, or it doesn't need to be that large, because it's not holding as much material, and it most likely doesn't need to be picked up as often. Food is what's rotting and starts to smell really bad and attract animals and pests. So if your compost bin is got majority of the food, your landfill bin, ideally, maybe you only get it serviced once a week instead of 3 times. And then getting a smaller bin, like I said, can actually help save, at least offset some of the costs of introducing composting into your program. And then, yes, I think it was mentioned earlier, if you do have neighbors and you can start sharing your resources and splitting those costs, like why not? Less bins in the alleyway, if you can help that. I also think in terms of adding compostable packaging, again, the durables switch. If you have the labor, and if you have the kitchen space and the dishwasher capacity, switching to more durables is better. And then, even offsetting that. So like you switched to a durable plate and a durable cup, but maybe you're still using compostable utensils or something like that. Trying to try to mix it in. And then I love a good SKU rationalization. So, of all the dishes that you're serving, how can you condense the number of products that you're using? Reducing your inventory, saving on storage space, and just kind of maximizing the cases that you are ordering. They have many uses versus just like a one-off here and a one-off there. So trying to really right sizing your plates even to use less product more often. And then, Denver's got the Skip the Stuff ordinance, which I love. I think, even coming from the products industry, we all have a drawer full of plastic utensils that we never wanted. We didn't need. We took that food home with us. Straws, condiment packets, those all cost money. And yes, cents turns into dollars. So really trying to make sure you're asking your guests, do they even want these products to begin with? Or having a self-service station, that's a really good way when people are coming and going, say like they can grab the fork if they need it, but you don't need to automatically give it to them. So yeah, those are just some of the tips. Austin.
I would just say that we've had really good luck reaching out to individual distributors, especially smaller farmers who are willing to bring things in rather than wrapped in a plastic bag. They'll bring it to us in a bin. We typically will incur the cost of getting those bins, but they actually just work their way into their cycle. And it has reduced a ton of physical stuff that otherwise needs to be dealt with on the back end. So it's worth thinking about and talking about.
The reusables too, yeah, to deal with like cardboard boxes, and it's like if you can kind of add reusables wherever possible, that's less stuff you have to handle, your staff has to handle at the end, which does cost money, labor, and then disposal costs. So love that.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm looking at, so you have your compost. Where do you haul that to? Turning it over to Christy with scraps. What should an owner be looking for when they're choosing or switching to a hauler when they're adding a compost service?
Yeah, I think, of course, first and foremost, making sure that haulers operate in your area where your restaurant or ideally all of your locations are. Definitely more efficient to use one hauler across your operations if you have multiple locations. I think looking into where their compost is taken and processed, like Austin said, we are always more than happy to have folks out to our small processing facility and give your team a better sense of what happens to the material when it gets here. And theoretically, everyone should be willing and able to share that. I think looking into what different pricing and cost models are across haulers can be really helpful. Our company offers just a monthly flat rate that is based on how many containers you have and how often it's picked up. We don't have any other hidden fees, fuel fees, environmental fees, as they're sometimes called, tipping fees, et cetera. It's all embedded into our pricing model. So you want to make sure you understand what the pricing model is for your service provider. Kind of along those lines, if you can get a sense, and sometimes this is just really buried in a contract, what does it look like to adjust or modify your service level? What does that look like in terms of how much time you need to give your service provider in order to make changes? How long until those changes are effective? How often you're able to make those changes, et cetera. We obviously really pride ourselves on kind of having a close working relationship, a partnership really with our customers, who we call members, to make sure that it's easy and quick to make those changes. I think it's important that your hauler have an understanding of the implications of URCO, and that they can offer you a service level that really meets your needs as a restaurant, as a food producer. And certainly in my opinion, isn't just sort of a de minimis kind of compliance on paper that doesn't actually meet your needs in terms of your level of food waste production and hauling needs. I would also recommend that you look into what level of training, support, education that a hauler offers. At Scraps, all of our new restaurants, any new customer that we take on, any new commercial customer gets a free/required training from us at your kickoff of service. We're also happy to provide additional training whenever requested, especially if you have multiple shifts or kind of different groups of employees that kind of require different training setups. We can provide that. So I think that's pretty important in the success of your program overall. So yeah, just kind of what kind of a partner they'll be for you, as opposed to sort of a drop the can and go type service provider. You'll of course want to understand what it is that they collect. Not all haulers will accept compostable products in this region. Scraps always has, always will. We, on our side, we accept anything that's CMA approved and BPI certified, as well as other products that we can sort of accept on a limited basis, that, or I should say on an approval basis, that are compostable, but maybe don't go through the certification process for various reasons. So your napkins, any sort of wood and cellulose-based product, paper products, that we may be able to work with you to make sure that we accept it. But essentially making sure that, especially if you're investing in transitioning your products from plastic, single-use plastic, to compostable, that your service provider, your hauler, can actually accept those. And yeah, whether they can report back to you on your diversion, weights, equivalents, kind of help you and your team understand the impact that your composting is making.
Great. Do you have a realistic monthly cost for what it looks like for a smaller mid-sized restaurant or bar to add compost pickup? And then are there ways that people can help control those costs?
Yeah, so we service, I think, 14 EatDenver members right now. We also have 75 plus coffee shops, lots of Starbucks among those, but also local coffee shops, 50 plus other restaurants. We service large campuses, MFUs, and commercial buildings that have ground floor food service. Kind of taking a look at the average cost, it runs about $300 a month for the average food producer in the Denver area. That gets you 2 to 3 64-gallon bins serviced twice a week. That's in our Denver service area. Of course, we service outside of Denver, so costs can go up if you're looking at kind of the outer reaches of our service area. Also for our kind of grocery stores, high volume customers, the cost can go higher. But for that sort of restaurant category, the highest that we have currently is $700 a month. I think that's 10 toters serviced twice a week. The lowest is $155. We also, so I think it's important to know, as a company, we require a minimum of 2 pickups per week for restaurants and food producers over 9+ years of experience. This is a surefire way to avoid the worst possible smells, other nuisances, etc., especially when you're collecting food waste from a restaurant. It's almost, especially in the heat of the summer, if you're only getting once a week pickups, that's just going to most likely lead to issues. So we require a minimum of 2 pickups a week. And again, we operate with that fixed monthly fee. There's no additional fees that you'll ever see on your bill with us. I will say we do have, and we make sure everyone knows that we do have contamination fees kind of on the books in our contract. I think we've issued one contamination fee in the Denver area in 9 years. So again, really the intention is to work with folks. If we see contamination, our drivers take a picture of it. You get an automated message about it. If it's an ongoing issue, our operations team will reach out, connect with you, see what we can do to address the issue, as opposed to just slapping a fine. And we do offer nonprofit rates, other discounts for community organizations. Of course, now for all EatDenver members, we're currently waiving setup fees and providing 1 free month of compost pickup to try and ease that cost burden, or just kind of the other burdens of shifting into composting as September 1 approaches. And again, we have that free/required training for all of our customers. Even as we've grown, we've really prioritized making sure that we can continue to offer that to all of our customers at the kickoff of your service, and again on an ongoing basis if you need it. We love it when folks like Olivia/Amelia and their team really utilize that ability to have ongoing training and engagement from us. And then of course we do also offer standard signage and customizable signage that meets the requirements of URCO. So that's all part and parcel to your service with us.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, I have a group question for all the panelists before we open it up to Q&A. But if you had to give one piece of advice to an owner or operator who hasn't started preparing for September 1 yet, what would that be? Hop in, panelists, whenever you want.
I would say to review the resources that the city has been putting out so that you fully understand what the requirements are, understand your building or business's waste streams, start talking to your haulers, and as of September 1st, become familiar with the waste diversion plan and what you'll need to submit to either prove compliance or request an exemption.
Engage with other people. I mean, that we have a really amazing community of people. My experience has been that everybody's willing to share information pretty freely. And if you're worried about where to start, reach out and find somebody to talk to, share those best practices. And then secondarily, start talking to your team about it, because it really will be as successful as the level of buy-in, proportionate to the level of buy-in that you have.
Yeah, I would just add that. I'm sorry. I would just add that internally, enhancing the culture is a no-brainer. It's not really difficult. Most of our staff, I would say collectively in this group, are going to get it, and they're going to get excited. Actually, they had a bunch of teenagers who were really excited that they only had a tiny little bin to put trash in it, that they didn't even fill it, right? It was like a competition. It's the guest-facing side that I hope we're going to discuss, because that's the biggest challenge. We're quick serve, so that's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I love that, Melissa, because I was going to say, just remember the overarching goal, right? Like our landfill, technically, because Colorado is expansive, has like 140 years left on it. So that's not necessarily the most pressing issue, but it is extremely irresponsible as humans that we throw precious resources into a tomb and we just build it up into its own little mountain and then wish it away, right? Methane landfills are one of the largest contributors of methane into our atmosphere. Methane is bad, 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 bad. Instead, this food could be served to other people. It could be fed to animals. It could be made into a soil-rich amendment. There's just so many other uses for it. And like, our aluminum cans, we have glass bottles, like all of these precious resources can actually be turned into new resources and live on. And so the real goal is that we are just going to be more responsible as a community and then show other businesses like it can actually work. And as Austin said, it's not, this really isn't that hard. It just takes building buy-in, figuring out what system works for you and your business, and then works with your sphere, right? Your hauler, your composter, your recycling, everything. So I encourage you to take it slow. You're not going to just go from 0 to 60. You don't, and that's not the intention. I think that's where the educational enforcement is really trying to support you. The city wants to support you. They want this to work for everybody as much as possible. And just so take it slow and get that buy-in, get people excited. I will just say, Melissa, and we can talk more, of course, but the front of house, remember this, it's recycling only for front of house. And Austin is totally correct. The signage it just kind of disappears when it's pictures and it's a poster. I love this shadow box idea where you actually build out a physical box and you put the products that are in someone's hand. So like if this is in my hand at your restaurant, I see it above the trash can. I see it above the recycling. And if you have a front of house compost, I see the products above your organics bin. I'm happy to send out some pictures. I can share that with Rachel to share with everyone. But I think having physical objects in your guest's view, and even back of house, or it could be your loading dock, wherever some waste is being collected and sorted, really helps identify what goes where better. But that's my long-winded. Start slow. This is a positive thing, and we can talk more about the collection.
No, and I 100% agree with you. In fact, we did exactly that. Like these are the 5 things we hand to the guest. This goes in this bin. This goes in this bin, and yeah, it was disappointing. I'm gonna try again. Obviously, I'm not giving up. Like clearly, we tried to do this in 2019, and it didn't go well. What I want to kind of ask Christy with a why, from what limited research I've done and what I've seen in other countries, is when cities and communities do this sort of thing, they invest in having standard bins so that I'm the guest. I'm going to see the same bin at McDonald's that I'm going to see at Little Man, that I'm going to see at Chipotle, and therefore it's it's standardized, right? And it's internalized by the public. And I'm wondering if that's something they could look at doing.
Right now that is not in the plans, but that's definitely something that we could consider. Right now our focus obviously is trying to get all the resources available online for everyone, get the educational materials. Everything is being added to the website. Like right now we currently have signage templates on the website. We will eventually have like a step-by-step guide for what you need to do to comply, tips and tricks for saving money, all these special resources for everyone. And then the technical assistance part of it will be coming after that. And I don't know that there'll be a standardization per se, but that's definitely something, we can consider. My colleague Kelsey is on the call as well. I don't know if she has any other insight that I missed, but feel free to jump in, Kelsey, if you do.
No, I think that was a great answer. Again, we're trying to provide as many standardized resources as possible. Unfortunately, we are working within the confines of budget, just like everybody else is. And so being able to provide bins isn't something that we can do at this point. But again, we're trying to provide as much as we can.
Melissa, I would jump in and say, first off, Kristen, to your question, all of the advice I could give has already been mentioned by other panelists. Just, don't panic. It's totally doable. Connect with your peers, utilize your resources. Melissa, there's definitely best practices for things for having standard colors, blue for recycling, black or dark brown for trash. That can be difficult. I'm going to not necessarily speak on behalf of the city, but that can be difficult, I would say, for a municipality to enforce when you have various hauling companies, each with their branded colors that may or may not align with kind of best practices in terms of that green, blue, black, dark brown coloration. But in your front of house or even in your back of house, kind of on-site collection bins would really encourage just going with that, with those standard colors. And then, if you have not just guests going from, establishment to establishment, but even staff working, across the industry, everyone begins to develop a kind of a standard understanding of how it's organized. Also, the concept of can parity, bin parity, is really helpful. So, and this is, this particularly useful in a front of house or an event setting, which of course we also do zero waste services for events. So essentially wherever you have one stream collection, you have all. So wherever there's a compost bin, there's also recycle and trash. Wherever there's, a trash bin, there's also recycle and compost. So you're giving your guests the option to make the right decision. And these types of tips and tricks are things that, if folks were to engage with us, even just for a free walkthrough, if you're not sure who you're going to choose as a service provider, our ops team can help you work through those types of kind of best practices.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to be clear to the other Christy. I wasn't suggesting the city provide the containers, but more or less like organize on your website. This is, if we all got together and these were my two, this size or this size, and everyone had, just sort of organizing it so that all of the vendors could be kind of choosing the same thing, but not providing them for free. I didn't think that was the thing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a quick question. When we're looking for service providers, are we looking for like a schedule of what they're providing, or are we going to be able to be like, we want pickups on Mondays and Fridays, or is it more up to the hauler of when they decide to come to the restaurants?
Michael, I would say, certainly for scraps, we are in the downtown Denver area 5 days a week. So it's a lot easier to customize your pickup schedule, whether that's twice a week. Some of our customers are 3 times a week, but that is going to depend on the hauler. Ideally, they'll be willing to work with you to get as close to what works best for your establishment as possible. And I would say as each hauler's market share grows in response to URCO, it's going to be easier and easier to kind of get what you need in terms of a schedule.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hi, Austin.
We had another question in the chat. Is the food scraps coming from tables considered back of house waste stream and thus needs to be composted?
I would say yes, if your staff is clearing the tables and scraping the plates. If the customers are taking care of that themselves and throwing that in bins, then that is considered the front of house and therefore not part of the requirement to be composted.
It's a bit of an extra step, but if you can put yourself in a position to weigh this stuff somewhat regularly, it's really illuminating, particularly with what's coming back from guests. It helps you dial in on portion control. And I know we've talked a fair bit about being in a position to internalize additional costs. That's one of the ways I think you can kind of claw back a little bit, but also stay aligned with your own internal sustainability initiatives.
Great. I think that could also be helpful for seeing if you can start tracking what's getting sent back a lot. Like, are you serving too large of a portion, or is something not working on your menu that's getting composted more frequently?
Yeah,
We've
if you
gone
can.
from like, say we've gone from Republic or from Alpine to GFL to Republic, but one of them, and I think it was Alpine or GFL, used to, for $10 a month, give you a printout to post for your staff, and it would show you how much you diverted from the landfill by weight, by month, and it was really great. The staff loved seeing that.
Another question. What operational, oh wait, not that one. I think it was for businesses that don't have a lot of back of house room, how have you been able to solve for that? Maybe that's an Austin and Christy Turner question. Oh, Christy with an I.
July, August, September. Yeah.
The flippant side of me says go spend some time in stage in New York City, because it's amazing what people can do with smaller spaces. Our kitchen is not big by any stretch, but when you're committed to figuring something out and you have a bunch of people thinking about problem solving, it's amazing the nooks and crannies you can find for compost bins and recycling, and just generally being more efficient with the process. Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, and it's not easy when price per foot is as high as it is in Denver, and you need to maximize all of that monetizable square footage. But again, being creative is a really good way to tackle it. And then when you find a solution, don't be shy, share it. There's something that I can learn from everybody else and vice versa. So, if you come up with your own proprietary, sorting robot, send it my way. I'm all ears.
Yeah, and I would say that again, this has really been kind of the bread and butter of our partnership with restaurants. With I would say almost everyone we work with has some sort of space constraint in their kitchen or in their loading dock or parking lot, whether we're talking about the actual kind of disposal points or the collection points. And thus far, there's always been a way forward. We have a team working out at the airport, our Zero Waste Valet team, that exclusively works with all of the concessions, the food and beverage concessions, currently on the B concourse, but in January expanding to the whole airport, and figuring out how to incorporate not just composting and recycling, but also a separate glass collection for the majority of them in sometimes very tight spaces. And it can be a struggle, but it's, I think, just orienting yourself toward that creative small space solution, which, I have to say I've kind of always been into, making the most of small spaces. There is a way forward. And, sometimes it might include an upfront expense of ordering a different bin size or different bin shape to fit in a particular space. We have tons of bins in stock that we're always happy to give to folks back from the days when we used to collect directly from kitchens and collect on bikes and trikes in 16-gallon and 10-gallon bins. We're always happy to help people source those or give folks our inventory. And, back to some of the earlier discussion, making room for composting, especially not necessarily with recycling, but making room for composting often can involve removing or downsizing your existing trash bins and making space that way.
Love it. I was going to add, I'm a big fan of in the back of house having like wherever people are prepping, wherever the different stations are, using those small, like I call them Lexans, but like those clear square containers or a bowl or just something small or a small bucket, like whatever you've got on hand. And then each station is as they're preparing, as they're cooking, all of that things, anything that needs to go, organics can just go into that bin or bucket. And then you carry it to a centralized location. Maybe there's a cart with wheels because food waste is heavy. Back of house stream is very heavy. And most of those bins, you really don't want to fill to the top. I've seen a 96-gallon cart that technically can hold 250 pounds be 450 pounds. Very dangerous, very bad. Wheels. Christy's like smiling. She's like, I know, I've seen that. But I love having that centralized place where maybe it's back kind of out of the way, but everybody's got their own compost, organics being collected. And then you can kind of check it really quick for contamination. So kitchen gloves, twist ties, a lot of those things that, come around food prep are a huge contaminant for the compost stream. And so you can kind of catch contamination way at the very beginning and pull that out. And then that's another way too. You can see, waste. Like I know my restaurant I used to work at, or the university, the guy would just like cut peppers. He would just like cut slices out of the pepper and then just like waste whole hunks of pepper. And it's like, well, that's money we're throwing away. So like, even if we're composting. So yeah, I like that way to try to decentralize where you're collecting.
We've had two chefs go down to Baldeo in Mexico City, and that was one of the big takeaways for them, that every station has a smaller compost bin. And obviously it's good for all manner of things, but it's also a really good mechanism for accountability as well. So you can actually see the physical representation of what's coming off of your station, as opposed to it just being the bigger catch-all, which is homogeneous enough to make it difficult to identify specifically what the buildup is. And they do such a good job with deeply embedding a desire to minimize waste, and being able to see, how well everybody's doing becomes, I think, a good way again to kind of propel things forward.
Great. Question from the chat. We don't currently offer trash. Do we need to start? Is there a percentage or minimum requirement for how much we need to be composting based on our usage? Do you have to use a hauler? Or can we donate to a farm or compost ourselves?
So I might have to lean on Kelsey a little for the trash component, but there is not a percentage that you have to achieve for the composting based on your usage. There's not any sort of minimum requirement for that. And you can self-haul if you take it either to a farm. You can compost yourselves, whatever. Those are like what we consider alternative ways to comply. And that's something you can identify in your waste diversion plans when you go to file those.
I can add on the other piece, just that this ordinance is really about access. So we're not, if you're not offering, trash to guests, like we're not trying to get you to add trash services if that's not within your business model right now. We are really trying to get people access to more waste diversion services, so that when they do go to throw something out, they have the option of either it's going to recycling or it's going to composting, rather than just going into the trash bin.
Great. Another city question, landlords refusing to provide recycling. What are landlord responsibilities to provide recycling for food service tenants? Is there any enforcement agency on that?
So the landlord is now on the hook, so to speak, for this service. They will have to provide it for you. They will be the ones that would get fined or penalized. In the future, we will have a mechanism for you to fill out a form to report your landlord that they're not offering the services. Again, right now in this kind of ramp up, there might not be a lot of mechanisms in place to pull on that, but we will definitely reach out to them. And if you want to let us know who that is, we could potentially reach out to them now and just let them know that they are required. We will be sending out a more mass communication to all of the people who are responsible for this ordinance. So that's coming soon as well.
And as part of that rollout, is there any instruction or support for shared spaces? I know a lot of downtown operators are concerned about, it's kind of rough to have those shared spaces that are just open to the public. Anyone can just contaminate your waste stream. There's also interactions with like multi-tenant buildings and strip malls. Is there any instruction or support around people who are in those types of spaces?
At the moment, we don't have anything specific for that. I think the biggest thing to think about is, each space is a little bit different. Each circumstance is different. I don't know if you have the opportunity to enclose that waste space and lock it. I know that's an additional cost, and that might not be reasonable. But at the moment, there's no way to really police, so to speak, what people are dumping into your bins if you're sharing them with others or they're open to the public. So
I'll say that. Oh, sorry. On our end, and I guess back to the question of what to look for in a hauler, we can put little locks on individual toters. We've got some unique situations across with some of our customers where we have toters locked. So toters being those rolling carts, and someone mentioned 96-gallon carts. Oh, Meghan did. That can get very heavy. We only use 64s, up to 64s, so they don't get too heavy. But we can lock those to something if there's something kind of in the wall or a railing that, a cart can be locked to so they don't walk away. And again, lock the lid so folks don't contaminate them. It's the kind of locking mechanism that someone could rip open if they really wanted to. We're not talking bear safe locks, just a sort of cheap customized solution that we do. But it's usually enough of a deterrent that someone's not going to put whatever, dog poop bag or, McDonald's take whatever it is that they were looking to get rid of and possibly contaminate your bin. As far as bin sharing in common spaces, so for some of our customers, if it's a multi-tenant building or a commercial office building with ground floor restaurant space, we are completely happy to have kind of the two different tenants or multiple tenants share the same compost bins. We just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, sharing the cost, and gotten the training and
the airport staff are sometimes very different. Sometimes.
But yeah, all sorts of solutions certainly from our perspective.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think Christy with scraps, I think what most haulers do offer some sort of locking mechanism, right? If you're collecting organics, specifically for organics, if you're collecting that, contamination is the number one evil of compost systems. And so I think most haulers that I know in the Denver area would do something to help you lock. And, you could have a shared key or a code that all of those businesses could use. But I think it's in everyone's best interest to keep the general public out of your organic bin. So, and actually, I just want to add, because I created a little list for everyone. Because again, contamination, number one enemy. Once it's in the compost stream, it is extremely difficult to remove. Even really, really expensive technology and equipment cannot get everything. And so I think really important for you to keep in mind as you start this journey of, and maybe enhance your journey of organics collection. Glass is the worst. If you just think all it takes is one wrong trash bag from the bar to get into the organics bin, all of those glass bottles very likely will break. They shatter into tiny pieces. Once they're about the same size as the finished compost, it actually will get into the compost, the finished compost bag. It'll go onto people's yards, and then you have children and animals. It's really, really bad. And glass is the worst for every composter, and it does happen often. So really do your best to train your staff. Absolutely no glass. Again, kitchen gloves. They're really flimsy. They break into a bunch of pieces, especially as the machines are turning the compost process. So then you have all these tiny bits of plastic that are extremely hard to remove. Same thing with film plastics. Film plastics are just a nightmare. They break into small pieces, even with the sun and the heat of the compost, but are almost impossible to remove. And nobody wants to see little bits of plastic in their compost bag as they're like putting compost into their garden or spreading it onto their lawn. PLU stickers are hard. I think composters at this point are just like, roll your eyes. Those are little plastic stickers. I encourage you to talk to your vendors where you're getting your produce, because those avocados, that case of avocados or that case of navel oranges that you got, if they're already stickered, those are really destined for the grocery store. You can talk. I used to work for a produce company. You can try to talk to them and say, hey, can you talk to your suppliers? We don't want the stickers. We want the non-stickered boxes, because it really is extra work for everybody. Fossil, obviously lookalikes. So food packaging that is not certified compostable. And like I said, if it doesn't tell you it's compostable, just believe it's not. Usually companies, if they're going to pay the money to get it certified, they're going to really test it. They're going to tell you, they're going to be proud of it. So yeah, and paper lined with plastic. A lot of those like craft takeout boxes, again, just if those are actually lined with real plastic and they will not break down. And then of course, like wrappers, condiment packets. Oof, another cost saving measure is get rid of the condiment packets and just go to bulk. I love just pouring, when you're dining in, just put it right on your tray, just put it right on your plate. And then of course, like feminine products. So a lot of companies who have their sustainability goals are collecting paper towels in the bathroom. You would be shocked at how many times feminine products get into that particular stream. So there's ways to try to avoid that. And then of course, reusables. I've been to a compost facility with like an 8-foot tower of silverware because it just accidentally got scraped along with the organics. So yes, highly encourage your staff to keep out the reusable dishware so you can keep using it and save your money that way. So
thank you so
Shout
much.
out to Tom Post from Scraps. He has a great video on stickers. And yes, lock it up. Pro tip.
Lock it up.
Thank you so much, Tom Post. That I'm advocating that be our DBA.
Tom Dodd. I'm going to post in the chat again. I posted it a little before, but we have the full Universal Recycling and Compost Ordinance webpage. Some zero waste support that Meghan had mentioned before. Check out that webpage for some additional financial resources as you're making these switches. I put in the Scraps member discount that Christy was chatting about. And then we also have a member discount with EP Distribution, which does Compostables and is very aware of all things URCO and works with a bunch of different haulers and compost companies to be compliant with that CMAH materials. And you can get a 15% discount with them as well. Thank you so much to our panelists. I will send a follow-up email if anyone needs panelist emails, has additional questions, wants to learn more. Please check that out or reach out to EatDenver directly and we can get you connected. But thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees. Good luck as we ramp up to September 1. And like everyone said, lean on your peers for support, reach out to these channels. We can all do this together and build a more sustainable city. So thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.